Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Little Acts of Kindness. This will be Part 28, Chapter 28, entitled Obstacles. Hitoshi waited outside Classroom 1A. He had been watching for the past few days, but Midoriya never showed up at lunch. Monday, he was a no-show, but his class didn't seem too worried, and from the rumors it seemed that the boy somehow hurt his throat Tuesday. Wednesday, Hitoshi had been about to approach when All Might came up and took Midoriya away. He decided that if he wanted to apologize to Midoriya, then he would have to just approach the kid earlier, possibly before school started. So here he was, arriving at UA, early, in hopes of being able to speak with Midoriya. And it wasn't like he could speak to him after school, as Hitoshi was too busy being given a crash course in some of the stuff he missed by midnight. The R-rated hero was pretty cool, and she told him that he shouldn't let others' opinions bother him. That's so long as he knew the truth about himself. What did it matter what others think? She helped him design a hero costume, one that had a couple support device ideas. After they drew it up and sent it to the support department, and they got to work on figuring out a hero name for him. Midnight warned him that whatever name he chose could and would influence how they would market him, and that often he had to portray himself to the brand that was created for him in order to climb the ranks of the popularity polls. He said that he was going to be an underground hero, and she nodded, so together they came up with Edict, the Order Bringer. Spotting a lone person walking through the hall, he dragged his attention towards the present and saw Midoriya walking down the hall. Finally, he would get his chance to apologize. Hitoshi started walking to the boy. "Hey, Midoriya, mind if we talk for a minute?" He saw the boy flinch a bit and walk faster away from him, not turning around. Hitoshi grimaced. Okay, maybe he should have expected that Midoriya would try and avoid him. He walked quicker, intent on catching up with the boy, who had turned around the corner. Following only about 10 or so meters behind, he turned the corner and stared down the corridor, which was empty. Frowning, he wondered if the student had ducked into one of the rooms to try and avoid him. So Hitoshi started looking into the rooms, but none of them held Midoriya. Hitoshi was also fairly sure he would have heard a door opening and closing. Where did Midoriya go? Frowning, he turned around and started to make his way to his class. He would have to try again at lunch. Eventually the other kids showed up and the bell rang for classes to start. Hitoshi did his work throughout the classes, and finally it was time for lunch. And he was determined that he would apologize to Midoriya, if the boy was actually there. He took his time going to the lunchroom, and when he arrived he looked over all the students looking for the green hair of Midoriya's. It took a minute, but he finally spotted him in the corner with a few other kids, which he recognized from the sports festival. There was Tokiyami, who had the intelligent shadow quirk, Uraraka and her gravity quirk, as well as Ida with his speed quirk, and finally a blonde who had a copy quirk, Monoma, if Hitoshi remembered correctly. He saw how Midoriya spotted him as he got closer, tensing up, how the table mates noticed and spotted him, watching him warily, almost like they were expecting him to attack. "Look, Midoriya, I don't know much about your life and I shouldn't have made assumptions, so I'm sorry for what I said at the sports festival," Hitoshi quickly said. With that, he turned and left, glad that he finally managed to apologize to the kid. He got into the line and got his own lunch. He couldn't wait to go back to his crash course in heroics with Midnight. After all, he would be joining the heroics class after internships. "As you all know, your internship papers are due tomorrow, so make sure you have them filled out and turned in. But today, we will be going over parkour, a valuable skill that heroes need to make use of when in pursuit of a villain, whether it's to avoid an obstacle in your path or to protect yourself from a fall. Go get your gym uniforms or your hero costume and meet at Gym Iota," Shota informed the class before turning and heading out, making his way to the designated gym. He watched the students arrive, nodding in approval when he saw Midoriya was one of the first to arrive and dressed in his hero costume. Soon others started coming in, some in their hero costumes, others in a gym uniform. "Good. Now that you're all here, let me explain how this gym works. Gym Iota was built so that different situations could be mimicked. I have the controller that can change the setup with a few options. It is up to each person to run through the course in a set amount of time, over the specified time, and the villain will have gotten away in the situation. As this is your very first lesson, the course will be set to the easiest mode with a longer time, and as you get better, it'll be shortened and the course made more difficult." Shota grinned as he set the course up. It was always interesting to see students undertake his course. Shota was about to start the course when the doors opened, and one of the third years arrived. "Oh! Are you guys about to do Aizawa's hell crawl? Is this your first time?" the guy asked, grinning. Shota sighed, recognizing Togata Mirio. "What are you doing here?" "Well, I had to come practice since our teacher gave us a free day, but I didn't know the gym was in use today." Shota nodded. What does he mean? Aizawa's hellcrawl, Ashido's voice called out. Tokuda turned to the class, grinning. You mean you don't know? Do try and be quick. I have a class I would like to teach. Shota grumbled as he saw Tokuda prepare to go into a story. Right, well, I'll tell you guys the full story later if you can find me, but basically ever since Eraser became a teacher here and had this gym built, no student has ever passed the course on its hardest difficulty. That is, the hardest difficulty on its longest timer. For beginners like you, I don't expect any to pass even on its easiest setting, on the long timer. I know nobody in my class did. Shota saw his students gaining a determined glint. Now, get into position. When the timer starts, you will enter the course, and notice blue lights along the path. This is not the only path to take. You can choose your own way through the course, and the goal is to just get to the other side and back. Do we have any volunteers? I'm good with watching. All the running and jumping will provide us guys with quite a view. Shota heard Mineta say to Kaminari, while leering at Yaoyorozu, who took a couple steps away with a look of disgust. Congratulations, Mineta. You just volunteered to be first. Ah, Mineta whined as he walked forward. Well, ladies, just watch. I'll ace this course, no problem. Shota looked at the controller and pressed a few buttons, adding a couple notches to the difficulty. He may be setting up Mineta for failure in this course, but really did the boy not know how to keep his thoughts to himself? Shota could see the girls grimacing, with a few of them self-consciously crossing their arms over their chests. His students should not be made uncomfortable by a fellow classmate. He would have to have a word or two with Mineta to hopefully straighten this appalling behavior. Mineta may be a teenage boy and hormonal, but that didn't give him the right to speak of his female classmates in such a way. Start, Shota said, not giving Mineta a countdown. He had been accused of being petty several times, and Shota wouldn't deny it. It took a moment for the boy to realize and race into the course where the TV screen lit up, the cameras keeping track of the boy and showing his progress. Mineta made some decent progress through the blue trail, but Shota knew the boy was moving too slow. The counter dinged, and at the 30-second mark, Shota saw Mineta pick up his pace, arms banging against a few of the lower-placed objects. At 15 seconds, another beep went off. Then a countdown started at 5 seconds, and Mineta failed, having only gotten halfway through the course. He didn't even make it to the parts Shota had set to a higher difficulty. Who would like to go next? Ida raised his hand, and so Shota nodded to the kid, who stepped forward, standing at the entrance line. Start. Like a rocket, Tensei's brother took off. Shota winced minuscule as the boy banged his head on an obstacle. The next minute passed in a similar vein, with Ida hitting various objects, even as the boy tried to slow his speed down enough to change directions and keep a fast pace. The males of the class gave a sympathetic wince as a bar swung out suddenly and hit Ida in the groin. With that last hit, Ida stumbled in a daze for his last few seconds before the timer buzzed him out. Shota looked at his students, most who were looking nervous now at the course. Midoriya bit his lip before looking and meeting his eyes. Taking a determined look as he stepped forward, Shota grinned, wondering just how Midoriya would do in this course. Start. Midoriya took off into the course, immediately ditching the blue path and heading up higher, scaling the buildings, and then started to jump across the roofs. Shota noticed that the boy stumbled a few times in his landings, and that he hesitated for a moment in his jumps at times, but otherwise was doing fairly good. Shota nodded in approval, and watched, wondering what Midoriya would do when another one of the traps would activate. A rumble, and one of the buildings collapsed, right as Midoriya was jumping. His students gasped in surprise, worried mutterings quickly breaking out. The camera tracked the boy's fall, and the class was silent as they watched him fall. They saw as Midoriya grabbed onto a ladder rung that was on the building and slid down it, stopping his momentum and potentially injuring fall. Then Midoriya continued through the last few meters of the course on the ground, and passed with a full 10 seconds remaining. Shota grinned full on, as Midoriya was the first student to pass the easy course on the first try. Shota watched as his class congratulated the boy, and Izuku hesitantly signed out a thanks, with Ida acting as a translator. Who's next? Uraraka raised her hand. Uraraka, you're up. The girl went and lightened herself up to go onto the roof, but lost some time with her nausea. She jumped across the roofs, but missed one of the jumps, falling down. With a cry of pain and her holding her leg, Shota called it off, and the medical bots put her on a stretcher and took her to Recovery Girl. If you are going via the roofs, do remember that the ground is hard, and while they may only be a couple of stories high here, out in the world they may be up to 10 or more stories, and a fall like that can be lethal. If you don't know you can make the jump, then do not try, Shota said to the class. Next, Ojiro volunteered. Ojiro took the standard blue path and made his way through, with only a few minor hiccups, passing with 5 seconds remaining. Shota glanced at Tokuda, lip curling as he saw the surprised expression the boy was wearing. He read the boy's lips as the third year whispered to himself, Not just one kid, but two? What is he teaching these kids? Shoji passed with only a couple seconds remaining, and one particular mishap, where a knife flew out and grazed one of his arms. Shota nodded and sent the kid to Recovery Girl. With no volunteers, Shota pointed randomly and picked Aoyama, who almost passed but just missed the final step by a half-second. Ashido went next and melted a bit of his course as she used her acid to slide through. Shota sighed. Do I really need to remind you that while this is a simulation, you can't expect to be able to damage buildings out in the world? You have to learn to work with your surroundings, not against it. Kaminari, followed by Kirishima, went, both of them failing, with Kaminari having been hit with a fake electrical cord, causing the boy to discharge accidentally, and the boy stumbling around, a confused expression on his face. Asui used her ability to stick to walls to pass, Yayorozu created some gear to pass, and Tokiyami took the roof's path, unhindered by the simulated earthquake. Hagakure was simply too slow, as was Sato, neither of their quirks helping much with the parkour. Sero passed using his tape, and Todoroki passed by freezing everything and skating through unhindered, earning the boy a flat expression as Todoroki had ignored him by saying that they were not to damage the buildings. Finally, Koda went last, and the boy failed. Take a moment to reflect on what you did, and the things I pointed out. Then we'll be running through it again, and I expect all of you to pass. Togata laughed. All of them? Isn't that a little much? Although I gotta admit, I'm surprised that so many of them managed to pass the first time. I suppose that saying's true. What was it? Like teacher, like student? Silence greeted Togata's words, and the boy chuckled. Ah, my joke fell flat again. Shota let out a long breath. Since you're here, how about you give my students a demonstration of the course on Hell difficulty? He questioned, raising an eyebrow at the now sweating boy. Oh, I really should be going now. Togata started to back away. I think not. After all, you interrupted my class. The least you can do is give a practical demonstration. Togata deflated. All right, then. The boy took the starting position after Shota switched the course and looked at his students. Now, the Hell difficulty adds in a villain he must follow. In this case, I will play that role, and he can't use his quirk at all. There's no timer, but if he loses track of me, he loses, or if he doesn't cross the finish within 10 seconds after I do. This will be Hell difficulty, with an easy target. Shota smirked. Start. And he took off through the course, expertly weaving through the streets, though keeping a somewhat slower pace to give Togata a chance. Using his capture weapon, he spun around a pole, hitting a button to activate a net trap, and continued running, not watching to see if the net hit the 30 or not. Running straight towards a building, he kicked off of it, using momentum to spin and double back towards Togata, whose eyes widened as Shota looped his capture weapon around the boy, spinning him harshly before continuing on. Ducking and weaving through the course, he hit a few more traps before crossing the line after ducking out of sight. 15 seconds later, the boy came out of the course after him, panting, out of breath, and sweating as he winced and rubbed at his arms. Shota heard the boy muttering in disbelief. That was an easy target? Shota turned to his class. Now, let me reset the course back to easy, and then you will run through the course again. His students nodded in agreement, Ashido whispering, I'm just glad we don't have to do that. He decided to be gracious and not inform them that he would be having them run through the Hell version before their finals. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 28 of Little Acts of Kindness. Chapter 29 will be up next. Hope you all are still enjoying, and as always, thank you so much for listening.